Hello everyone, Kate here, and I'm in my kitchen because I'm going to be processing my harvest yesterday when I was out foraging. And I wanted to share some of that with you because I got a lot of questions yesterday about it. But also, if you're like, oh, I'm not really into foraging, I think I'll skip this video. Maybe not. Maybe stick around to the end because there are some tips I'm going to give you about how to make your body more ready and resilient for foraging or whatever you're into. Because the overarching theme of becoming unbreakable is that you get to live the life you want to live and do the things you want to do whenever you want. Not like someday, not, oh, I used to do that, but I don't do it now. Like right now, what do you want to do? Okay, let's make your body resilient and ready to do that. So at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a few tips about how to start moving your body to more readiness, more unbreakableness, so that you can go do whatever you'd like to do. Okay, so let's get into some rules of foraging. Number one, don't forage your yard unless you are absolutely sure that there have never been pesticides sprayed on your yard. Number two, don't forage near roadways. Cars have fumes and exhausts. That can get into plants. You don't want to eat that either. And then number three, be extremely responsible about how you forage, both in the identification knowledge that you learn and harvesting knowledge that you learn, but also in your actions. So with regard to knowledge, you really want to be sure from a health perspective that you know what you're identifying before you take it, but also that you understand the plant and the environment that it's in so that you can be responsible when you show up to that environment to participate in the ecosystem by harvesting some of the leaves or roots or flowers or whatever. But also in your actions. Foraging has exploded in recent years for obvious reasons. You see it on social media. It's easy to find videos about it. And also, I think humans just want to be closer to nature, and that's marvelous. But like all things, there's a lot of us humans on the planet, and we tend to show up in one area all at once. So it can be a burden on nature, and you really want to consider that. And that might mean not foraging certain things on certain years because maybe there isn't as much like there is this year in the western half of the US, or because someone has already been there. That's something you'll want to learn is when you're foraging, being able to recognize an environment and go, something or someone has already been through here. I'm going to pass by and find another area. And that might mean you don't find another area that day. And it just is what it is. So those are some simple guidelines and rules you want to follow before you start foraging. Then a couple of that are really important are like legit, make sure you know what you're identifying. Don't just rely on an app to tell you what the plant is. That's helpful, but what if it's wrong? So you want to back it up with other sources to make sure you're getting the right thing. And then also make sure you're getting only as much as what you know you're going to use and have a plan for how you're going to use it. There's nothing worse than harvesting a bag of dandelion greens, for example, and having this all go to waste. That would be terrible. So don't do that. So even if you find something that you're like, oh, I'm certain of what this is, and you're like, I know it's used for something, but you can't remember what, consider leaving it this time and going home and doing a bit more research and coming back ready before you decide to harvest. In addition, when you show up in an area to harvest, it's responsible to view the area that you're about to harvest from and only harvest from 20 to 30% of the total plants. So it's a very small percentage of the plants that you're even going to harvest from. And then from those plants, only harvest 20%. So you're going to be taking a very little amount from the greater amount that's actually there. I was hoping to get some other things yesterday, but all I found was my usual 3 favorites for spring, which I'm not disappointed in, but you know, you just take what you can find and you're grateful for it. So the first one was dandelion. I think we all know dandelion, cute little weed that, you know, people tend to just want to get rid of. Dandelions are great. They're very bitter, especially the bigger they get. But dandelions, because they're bitter, that is a dead giveaway that they've got stuff in them that you're not likely to find in greens that are not bitter. So foods have different flavors for different reasons. And I'm not going to get into the whole, like, this is what this is good for because I don't want to be liable for anything. You can do your own research, but I like to eat these because they make me feel good. But I appreciate that they've got some vitamins and minerals in them that I'm in need of in springtime for a little rejuvenation. That's all I'll say about that. And then indigenous cultures have a history of using these for cleansing and detoxifying. Again, do your own research. So people ask, well, what do you do with dandelions besides eat them raw? You could eat them raw. They're good. You also could steam them like you would spinach. Mix them in with other greens as well. If you're new to bitter foods, definitely mix them in with other greens because you're probably not going to be prepared for how bitter they can be. I love it. I think that amount of bitter is fantastic. But also, one of my favorite ways to have dandelion is to put them in pesto. So I take a traditional pesto recipe and switch out the traditional greens for all wild greens, and then a ton of garlic, some good olive oil, and some good hard cheese. And I often don't have pine nuts, so I'll just get walnuts. And it makes a delicious pesto. And pestos freeze really well. So in the winter, when you're like, man, I just need a little cheery pick-me-up and I'd like some good vitamins, and you're real sick of spinach at that point, it can be great to have dandelions on hand in the form of a pesto. So with these, I'll give them a good wash this afternoon, trim the ends, and then dry them off and get them ready for preparing right away. And anything I'm not going to prepare in a pesto today or saute today or dry, I forgot to mention that, you could dry these for a tea. I'm going to have these freeze dried in vacuum seal packs so that they're perfect and they aren't going to get all freezer burned, and then process them in batches along the way. With dandelion, lemon goes really good. So highly recommend that. Okay, so the next thing I got yesterday was stinging nettle. It's not called stinging nettle for no reason. So I'm going to handle it with a paper towel. When you brush up against stinging nettle, you will, if it's not cooked or dried, you will discover why it is called stinging nettle. For some people, it's not unpleasant at all. For others, it's quite unpleasant. However you respond to stuff, it's going to influence how you respond to nettle. When I first accidentally brushed into it years ago, was like, what is this itching thing all over me? And I realized it's nettle. To me, it's not anywhere near as bad as mosquito bites. I am a big responder to mosquito bites, but less so to nettle. And I actually got a little on my pants yesterday, and then that went through on my shins. And I was like, ooh, it's burning, but it kind of felt nice, if that's not weird. So anyways, I want to show you this. So this is nettle. You can see very clear striations on the back, as opposed to dandelion, for example, which doesn't have those. Once you ID nettle, you'll never not ID nettle again. You'll see it everywhere. So when you're learning to ID nettle, you're gonna look, and you can't see them anymore, but you'll see little hairs along the back. It's got a very distinctive shape of its leaf, and it just, like, you can't miss it. Once you know it, you can't miss it. And so learning to ID nettle is fantastic. Get a book that teaches you about the shape of the leaves and the position of the leaves on the stem, the shape of the stem, what to look for, like the hairs, identifying characteristics, because as I said, not so much with nettle, but with other plants that are poisonous lookalikes, and you want to be super sure. So anyways, I got a bunch of nettle. I love nettle. That just smells like green. It smells like nature. Like, it's so good. Nettle is a very hardy green. If you saute it, it's going to take you a while to chew it, a lot like if you cook kale, as opposed to like a spinach or something like that. You can saute it. That will immediately kind of negate the hairs issue that are tingly. So that's good. And so if you were to use it in some sort of food thing, you need to either cook it or dry it before you use it. Otherwise, you're going to get the icky sensation, and you don't want that in your mouth. So with nettle, it smells, as I said, oh my God, that is amazing. Like green, spring, luxuriant, that's what it smells like, and that's what it tastes like. Again, that is not a flavor that people are used to, and people go, well, what does green taste like? Think of the most natureful deep breath you can think of, and then add a little salinity to it. That might be a little hard for you to conceptualize, I know, but you'll get it once you've tried it. The flavor of nettles is divine. It also makes an amazing pesto. I saute them. Tomorrow I'm going to put them in a frittata kind of thing that I'm going to make with some mushrooms. You can also freeze dry these if you need to save them for later. Dried as a tea is by far my favorite, because some people on the internet say that nettles are very good for things like allergies and inflammation and coughs and lungs and things like that. Do your own research. I'm not going to be the one that tells you that that's what it's good for. But I like it in the wintertime when I get irritation in my throat. And so I will dry some. Actually, I have some right here. Here's a mini jar left over from last year. Okay. So that's what I do with the nettle. And so I'm gonna, same thing, wash, pat dry. This I will wear gloves when I process. I also wear gloves when I pick this. You're welcome not to, but you know, you'd be more tolerant than I of the prickly sensation. I will wear gloves when I process. I'll pat dry, same thing. I'll process some for food today and tomorrow. The rest will go into freezer seal bags that are like vacuum sealed so that I can do the rest of the process later on. Finally, this is like the Christmas present. Spruce tips. These, if you followed me for years, know these are by far my favorite thing to find every year. I appreciate everything I find, but I have a very special spot in my heart for spruce tips. They smell like a sweet Christmas, so that should entice you. Legit, I like smell the tree in spring, like for about 5 minutes. They will have a pine scent to them. So if you think of pine trees, other kinds of conifer trees, Christmas trees, they will have that pine resinous scent to them, but that will vary based on the species. So you'll have to get to know trees to get to know which ones smell like that. It smells sweet and divine and fresh and almost limey, which lime goes well with them. It's heaven. So the way I made this the last couple of years was to make some syrup from them, which was really good. These also they have vitamin C in them. You might use that for things. Go look it up. But I make this as a syrup, which you can drizzle on anything, put in tea, whatever, put in cocktails, which is very good. And it makes me feel good because it tastes delicious. Hey, the vitamin C is also very good for you. And it just feels like I'm in nature having this yogurt or cocktail or cheese or whatever I'm putting my drizzle on top of. This year I'm going to try a couple other things because I'm going to make some sugar too, but or some syrup, I should say. It starts as sugar, then it becomes syrup. But I'm also going to try a couple other ideas I have for making like a posset, which is like a pudding, an old-fashioned pudding that you make without gelatin. So I've got some different ideas just to try some different things. You could also just use regular pine needles or not the fresh spring ones. These are only in spring that you will find these. It is the new growth on the edge of a branch of a spruce tree. It's neon green. You can't miss it. You could use pine needles too. The taste will just be slightly different. I will say with this, you should make sure you can identify the difference between a yew tree and normal pine trees. Because a yew is toxic. It is often used in landscaping. You'll almost never find it in the wild, but be sure that you know how to identify because you don't want to eat a toxic plant. So that's the spruce tip. So with these darlings are going to immediately go into a jar with some brown sugar. That's going to sit in the windowsill for a month so that it can condense down a little bit, release some water or some liquid from the sugar and the pine needles, the spruce tips, and then I'm going to take that to the stove and melt it down further into a syrup, and then that'll store permanently in the fridge. All right, now it's time for those tips about how to be more resilient for the activities that you want to do. So I noticed yesterday as I was foraging how many times I was getting up and down from a squatting position, and I was like, man, I'm thankful that my knees feel really good, that my hips are sturdy and steady enough to squat down and stand back up without pain, and that when I don't want to squat down and stand up and I want to just bend over, that my low back's not hurting and aching as I do that. I was so thankful for that. Part of how I got there was making sure I'm always taking care of my 6 pillars of my unbreakable body. So if you're not familiar with those, there's 6 areas of your body that if you keep those areas kind of tip top and, foundationally strong, they're kind of a good base to them. You're going to be able to do a lot of stuff because you'll just be able to layer on top of that rather than going out to do this effortful thing, whether it's a bike ride or playing with the grandkids or foraging. You'll already have the base. So instead of having to go out and do this big thing without the base and then be like, oh boy, that was a big stretch from where my capacity is, you'll have this nice base built where you're just maintaining your fitness in these 6 areas. And so it's just a little step up to each next thing that you want to do. So the 6 pillars are strong feet, mobile hips, strong glutes, strong torso, mobile shoulders, and strong posture. And so whatever workout program or body care program you do, see if it matches those 6 areas. And if it doesn't, you'll want to fill in those gaps. Of course, I have programs that fill in all those gaps for you, but you can apply the 6 pillars to anything from Pilates to weightlifting to body weight training, whatever you're into. So that's the first one. Make sure your 6 pillars are always at that foundational level. You've got that base built so that it's not a huge stretch to go out and do these different activities that you want to be able to do. Number 2, you've got to be working ahead of time. You can't just say, well, next week I want to go do this fun, bike trip through wine country with my friends, for example. Or, oh, foraging sounds fun. I want to give that a try. You can still go do that, but you might experience some of the outcomes that come from doing that without having your body be ready. So start now because it pays off later. Be willing to start now on some work to build your 6 pillars, to learn the skills to forage or sew or bike ride or whatever. Be willing to do the work now, even though you're not going to do the thing right now. I know the thing is the big, fun, sexy, exciting thing, but to do that, you got to do this. So start now, making your body and your knowledge and your capacity ready for the activities that you want to be able to do. And then third, make it a part of your life regularly. So if you only forage once a year, or if you only go on the bike ride once a year, there's not much of a drive to keep at it the rest of the year. And so you have to go on these like up and down journeys to make yourself ready. In order to avoid that, find other ways to bring that into your life. So for example, there isn't much to forage in the winter around here, but that's a great time for learning more about plants, getting a plant coloring book and doing a relaxing evening of coloring. You might laugh, but these are things that keep you connected to the activities you love. And the thing I hate to see the most is that when someone is like, oh, in August every year we play the football game where all the guys get back together again from high school and we play a game, or I take my kids once a year to do this other thing. And that thing is the one thing. And so it becomes such a stretch to get there because the foundation wasn't built and they didn't start ahead of time, that it becomes a drag. It becomes like, well, I do love this. I guess we're going to go do it. But then it's hard and it takes forever to recover. And you almost kind of forget why you like it a little bit. Instead, find ways to incorporate it into your life throughout the rest of your year so that you keep that stoke going to keep yourself excited for these activities that you actually love. There's nothing worse than becoming one of these I used to do kind of adults. Like, oh, I used to do that. Oh, I used to do that. Oh, I used to do that. No matter what age we are the do more adults, not the do less adults. So build your 6 pillars so you get that foundation nice and strong. Start now so that you're ready for when the fun comes, and build it into the rest of your life so that you're motivated to keep doing the work for when the thing comes, to maintain your 6 pillars and to make it exciting and fun to keep doing this thing you love to do. And it's not such a thing that you have to get to because you're so far from having experienced it. Okay, let me know if those tips resonate with you, and if you go out to try foraging, let me know what you find and let me know what fun you have.